Hello everyone, welcome to Season 4, Episode 11 of my podcast, Book and Story World with author Priya Grewal. I hope everyone's having a fabulous week so far. For today's episode, I thought I would read out a very short story that I've written especially for my podcast. So the short story is of the horror fantasy genre. The title is Into the Video Game by myself, Priya Grewal. And again, I've written it just for this episode. So let's dig in. Into the Video Game by myself, Priya Grewal. Esther was 35 years old and lived with her mum. She had short black hair cut into a bob and green eyes. Esther loved playing video games. It was 11:30 p.m. and Esther was in her living room with the lights off and the curtains drawn, having a fantastic time playing a cowboy game on her video games console. Esther's mum had already gone to bed for the night. Esther grinned as her game controller vibrated as the character she was playing shot at some other cowboys and then hid again. Meanwhile, a goddess called Hazard, who lived in the god and goddess realm, who was famous for mischief, had decided to look in on planet Earth and came across Estro, who was having fun playing the cowboy video game, and the character she was playing was currently shooting other men in a saloon with his companions. Hazard smiled to herself as she watched Estro play in her magical television screen, as a new mischievous plan formed in her mind. Hazard flung her long blue wavy hair behind her and narrowed her orange eyes. She stretched out her hands in front of herself, got ready to command her magic, and shouted out, "Send Estro into the cowboy video game." Estro was in the middle of shooting in the game when her controller was suddenly flung out of her hands by an unseen force, and she felt a cold gust of wind surround her, along with some kind of vortex. Estro screamed as the cold wind of the vortex hit her. As she was screaming, the vortex disappeared, and Esther cried out in confusion and fear as she saw she was in the saloon in the video game she had been playing. She was currently sat hiding behind a chair as the cowboys shot at each other. Esther didn't have time to think as she saw the character she had been playing, called Maverick, who had sandy blonde hair and a cowboy hat on, turn to her and say in an American Texan accent, "What are you doing, Estro? Get shooting." Maverick slid a handgun over to Estro. Estro wailed as she heard the gunshots in the air and picked up the handgun with no idea of how to use it. Estro yelped in fear when Maverick suddenly shouted to his two companions and herself, "They're taking cover! Let's run to our horses and get the hell out of here!" Estro made panicked sounds of fear as she quickly stumbled to her feet. Esther didn't have time to think. She hurried out of the saloon behind Maverick, glancing back to see the enemy men taking cover behind the bar. As Estro and the three cowboys rushed to their horses, Estro wailed, "I'm going to die!" "No, you're not, Estro," Maverick shouted back, climbing onto his horse. The other two cowboys also climbed onto their horses. Estro stared at the fourth horse. She had no idea how to clamber onto it. "Let's go," Maverick called out, and himself and his two companions rode speedily away on their horses. "See you later," Maverick called out in the distance to Estro as he saw her lagging behind. "Ah, what now?" cried out Estro. The remaining horse neighed and then rode off by his or herself. Estro glanced helplessly towards the saloon and saw that the enemy men were starting to stand up. Estro panicked, terrified of being killed in the game, finally wondering how she even got there. Esther glanced to her right and did the only thing she could think of doing. She ran into the field of crops to hide. Meanwhile, as Hazard watched Esther in the video game from her castle, she cackled and cackled, rolling around in laughter. While she did this, Hazard's friend Ian thought she'd give Hazard a scare by teleporting suddenly into Hazard's living room without being invited. Ian was also a goddess with purple hair and silver eyes. Her hair was in a high ponytail. Ian teleported into Hazard's living room, shouting out, "Boo!" "Ah!" Hazard cried out loud in shock. Ian burst out laughing, sitting on one of Hazard's sofa chairs. Ian saw Hazard glance at the television screen guiltily. Ian looked at the screen to see a young woman running through crops in what looked like an old Western Planet Earth movie setting. Ian frowned as she saw the woman dressed in modern Planet Earth clothing. She could hear death threats along with gunshots in the air. Hazet looked nervous as Iam worked out what was going on. This better not be what I think it is, Iam said sternly to Hazet. Hazet shrugged her shoulders smugly, stating, It's nothing. Have you put a human woman into a cowboy movie? Iam shouted furiously to Hazet. It's a video game, Hazet mumbled, giggling to herself. You wretched, Iam began, raising her hands into the air to magic the young woman out of the video game. Oh, no, you don't, Hazet shouted, blocking Iam's magic with her own. Iam looked at Hazet, distressed, determined to get the woman out of the game before she was killed in it. Back in the game, Estro had found a bush to hide in after exiting the crop field the men were trampling through. Estro tried not to make a sound as she trembled in fear, listening to the death threats being called out into the air. Suddenly, Estro felt a hand tighten onto the collar of her t-shirt and drag her out of the bush. The man who had grabbed her was missing a few teeth and was wearing a checked shirt with a cowboy's hat on and was grinning down at her. You're off to the gallows, sweetheart, the man leered and gloated to her. Estro cried out in pain as the man began to drag her across the ground, shouting out, Found her! Estro heard cheers and gunshots in the air again. She screamed in terror, knowing her life was about to come to an end via hanging. All of a sudden, as Estro prayed for a miracle, a purple diamond appeared in her hand with the instructions, Squeeze me. Estro quickly squeezed the diamond in her hand, and as she saw it turn into dust, her surroundings turned a blank white for a moment. And when she blinked again, she was lying on her living room floor, back to her own planet again. In the god and goddess realm, a group of gods and goddesses stared at Hazet furiously. Iam had managed to rescue the young woman Estro by getting around Hazet's magical blocks by sending in an object instead, a diamond that needs squeezing to teleport Estro out of the game to the safety of her own home. Iam had told some of the other gods and goddesses what Hazet had done. Hazet insisted that she wasn't trying to kill the woman, she was just having fun and was going to teleport her out of the game before being killed via hanging. The gods and goddesses accepted Hazet's story, but gave her a severe warning to never mess with human lives again. Hazet agreed, eventually skulking away, pulling a malicious face secretly, thinking she had still got away with her moment of dangerous mischief. Back to planet Earth, around half an hour had passed and Estro had begun thanking whatever powers were out there for rescuing her, as she was still in her living room. Estro unplugged her games console with the cowboy game inside it, packing it away so she didn't have to look at it for a very long time. As Estro climbed the stairs to go to bed, she felt perplexed and confused, wondering if gods and goddesses existed, wondering who had rescued her, and who had messed with her in the first place. The end. Okay, so I hope anyone who tunes into this episode enjoys my short horror fantasy story called Into the Video Game by myself, Priya Grewal. I'll be back next Wednesday with my next episode. Until then, I hope everyone has a fabulous week. And thank you to anyone who tunes in and listens to my podcast. Take care, everyone. Have a great week. Bye-bye.